When the empath finally snaps, everything changes. The kindness, the patience, the endless understandings, gone in an instant. Carl Jung once studied this exact moment, the breaking point where an empath transforms into something unrecognizable. Not because they've lost their compassion, but because years of absorbing other people's pain finally ignite a fire they can't put out. For Jung, this wasn't just an emotional outburst. It was one of the most dangerous and potentially transformative moments in the human psyche. Because when the empath snaps, the shadow they've been suppressing comes roaring to the surface, and nothing will ever be the same again. They say an empath can sense the smallest shifts in another person, the tightness in their voice, the heaviness behind their eyes, the silence that hides a storm. For years they adapt to these undercurrents. They take the blows without complaint. They forgive without being asked. They convince themselves that absorbing the pain of others is their role, even their purpose. But deep inside, something begins to change. It's not sudden. It's not even noticeable at first. It's the slow build of pressure in a sealed container, resentment forming in the cracks, anger curling like smoke in the subconscious. And when it finally escapes, it's not a spark. It's an eruption. Carl Jung recognized this pattern. In his work, he described how certain personalities, often those gifted with extreme sensitivity, live in a state of one-sidedness. They over-identify with their capacity to care, to heal, to protect, while ignoring, even rejecting, the darker truths within themselves. This ignored truth Jung called the shadow, the unacknowledged parts of the self that don't disappear simply because we refuse to look at them. And for the empath, the shadow grows in silence, in service, in the constant denial of their own needs. Jung believed that when the empath snaps, it's not the moment they become cruel. It's the moment the shadow demands to be seen. Years of unspoken boundaries crash into place overnight. The voice that never argued becomes sharp. The hands that only comforted now push away. The person who once took pride in their limitless patience feels an urgent, almost primal need to reclaim their space. This is not weakness. It is not failure. It is the psyche's way of restoring balance. But balance achieved without awareness can be dangerous. If the empath doesn't understand what's happening, the sudden shift can turn into bitterness, self-isolation, or even a complete rejection of the compassion that once defined them. To Jung, this breaking point was a crossroads. One path leads to transformation, to the integration of the shadow and the birth of a self that is both compassionate and self-protective. The other path leads to collapse, a loss of identity, trust, and connection. And the deciding factor between the two is whether the empath can face the parts of themselves they've been running from. In this video, we'll walk that path step by step, through Jung's own insights, the hidden traps that can destroy the empath after they snap, and the tools to rebuild into something stronger than before. Because in Jung's eyes, the day the empath snaps is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the most important chapter of their life. Jung saw the empath's breaking point not as a random collapse, but as the inevitable result of living in imbalance. In his framework, every person has both a conscious identity, the I we present to the world, and an unconscious counterpart. For the empath, that conscious identity is often built entirely around compassion, service, and understanding. They become the healer, the confidant, the one who can hold space for anyone, no matter how toxic or destructive that person might be. But the unconscious counterpart, the shadow, is where the truth hides. It holds the feelings we deny: anger, resentment, the need to be alone, the desire to say no. The more these truths are suppressed, the more pressure builds. And when the empath finally snaps, it's because the shadow has forced its way into the light. Jung described this eruption as a confrontation with the self, not the polite, socially acceptable version of yourself, but the raw, unfiltered totality of who you are. It can feel like losing control. It can feel like betrayal of others and of yourself. But in Jung's eyes, it is also the first step toward individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. This is where the empath enters dangerous territory. The shadow, once released, does not simply retreat. It wants expression. It wants recognition. And without guidance, that can take the form of 3 traps Jung warned about: psychological pitfalls that can distort the empath's transformation into something destructive. The first is inflation. This is when the empath, suddenly aware of their shadow, begins to over-identify with it. They go from self-sacrificing to ruthless, from endlessly forgiving to cutting people off without a second thought. It feels liberating at first, but it's not balance. It's just swinging to the opposite extreme. The second is contamination. Here, the empath's shadow doesn't just surface. It seeps into everything. They begin projecting their repressed anger onto everyone they meet. Small slights feel like massive betrayals. They see hostility where there is none. The world becomes a mirror for the pain they've been carrying, and relationships crumble under the weight of suspicion and mistrust. The third is collapse. This is when the empath's identity shatters under the strain of transformation. They don't know who they are without their role as the healer. They feel lost, detached, unable to reconnect with the compassion that once guided them. In this state, isolation becomes a refuge and a prison. Jung warned that these traps are not signs of failure. They are signs that the psyche is struggling to find its new center, and with the right awareness, they can be navigated. But without it, the empath risks turning their gift into a source of destruction for themselves and for those around them. In the next section, we'll break down how to recognize these traps as they appear, and the steps Jung believed were essential to integrating the shadow, not just unleashing it. Because snapping is only the beginning, what comes after will decide whether the empath emerges whole or hollow. So how does an empath avoid falling into these traps? How do they move from snapping in pain to transforming in strength? Jung's answer began with one word: awareness. The moment the shadow bursts through, you have 2 choices: to react blindly or to witness yourself. Most people choose reaction. They ride the wave of anger or collapse into guilt. But Jung believed that the moment of snapping, as disorienting as it feels, is a doorway into self-knowledge. The first step is naming what's been hidden. Sit with the feelings you've been avoiding, the frustration at always being the one to compromise, the exhaustion from carrying everyone's secrets, the grief of feeling invisible in relationships you've poured yourself into. Write them down. Say them out loud to yourself. This is not indulgence. It's acknowledgement. You can't integrate what you refuse to face. The second step is creating space before response. Jung often spoke of the importance of giving the unconscious room to breathe without letting it take control. When the urge to lash out or cut someone off appears, don't act immediately. Step back. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this my truth or my wound speaking? Sometimes the shadow's first words are distorted, fueled by years of repression. Give it time to clarify. The third step is rebuilding boundaries with intention. For the empath, boundaries are often thin, invisible, or entirely absent. When you finally draw them, it can feel like you're pushing people away. But healthy boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. They decide what enters your emotional space and what doesn't. And they protect your capacity to care without being consumed. The fourth step is reclaiming your own needs as valid. Jung saw individuation as the union of opposites, the blending of light and shadow into one whole self. For the empath, that means learning to give without self-erasure. It means saying no without guilt. It means realizing that your well-being is not selfish. It's the foundation for any true compassion you offer to others. And finally, the fifth step is reconnecting with compassion on your own terms. After snapping, it's easy to see compassion as weakness. You may want to shut it down completely. But Jung would argue that the goal is not to abandon your gift, but to wield it consciously, to care for others without losing yourself, to feel deeply without drowning, to be both the healer and the one who knows how to heal themselves. None of this is easy. In fact, it may be the hardest work you'll ever do, because it requires looking at yourself without flinching. It means admitting that your light has shadows, and that your shadows have something to teach you. In the next section, we'll explore how Jung believed this process, messy, painful, and unpredictable, is actually the beginning of the empath's true power, and why the day you snap might be the day you finally step into who you were meant to become. Jung believed that every crisis carries a hidden invitation. It may come wrapped in chaos, fear, and uncertainty, but if you accept it, it leads somewhere extraordinary. For the empath, snapping is often the moment they finally meet themselves. Not the version shaped by everyone else's needs, not the identity built on endless giving, but the raw, unfiltered self that has been waiting in the shadows. When the dust settles after the snap, something strange begins to happen. The noise of other people's emotions quiets. The constant pull to fix, help, and heal starts to loosen its grip. And in that silence, the empath can hear something they haven't heard in years. Their own voice. It's a voice that asks different questions. Not, what do they need? But, what do I need? Not, how can I make this better for them? But, what would make this better for me? And these questions aren't selfish. They're necessary. Because you can't give from an empty vessel, and you can't truly see others if you've never fully seen yourself. Jung called this stage the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. For the empath, it means learning that their gift isn't just in feeling for others. It's in knowing themselves deeply enough to choose when, how, and with whom they share that gift. Here's where transformation begins. Boundaries stop feeling like a punishment and start feeling like protection. No becomes a sacred word that guards your energy. Yes becomes a conscious choice rather than an automatic reflex. And empathy stops being a compulsion. It becomes a skill you can channel with precision. The world may not understand this new version of you. Some will miss the old you, the one who never said no, who carried burdens without complaint. And they may push back. They may call you cold, distant, or changed. But you'll know the truth. You haven't lost your compassion. You've reclaimed it. Jung saw this reclamation as one of the highest achievements of the psyche, because it means you are no longer ruled by one side of yourself. You are light and shadow, strength and softness, compassion and self-respect. You are no longer an open wound. You are a healer with armor. This is the paradox Jung loved most, that sometimes breaking is the only way to become whole. The empath who snaps and chooses to face their shadow doesn't just recover, they evolve. They move from unconscious service to conscious connection, from self-sacrifice to self-mastery, from being shaped by the world to shaping the world in their own image. In the final part of this video, we'll explore how to carry this transformation forward. So the day you snapped doesn't become a story of loss, but the opening chapter of the life you were always meant to live. When an empath reaches their breaking point, it can feel like the end of their identity. The person who once radiated patience now bristles at every request. The heart that once overflowed with care feels locked behind heavy doors. It's disorienting, even frightening, to watch yourself shift into someone you barely recognize. But Jung saw this not as the death of the empath, but as the stripping away of illusions. He believed that before we can step into our wholeness, we must meet ourselves in the raw. That means encountering the parts of us we've judged, denied, or abandoned, and discovering the gold hidden in their darkness. This is where the alchemical metaphor becomes powerful. In Jung's studies, he often compared psychological transformation to the ancient art of turning base metals into gold. The snapping point is the fire, the intense heat that melts the rigid structures of who you thought you were. It's uncomfortable. It burns away false identities. And in the chaos, what is essential begins to emerge. For the empath, this process starts with recognizing that compassion is not their only truth. Beneath the layers of kindness lies the capacity for anger, assertiveness, even righteous defiance. These are not flaws. They are energies the empath has never learned to channel constructively. The goal is not to get rid of them, but to weave them into a fuller, stronger self. One of Jung's most famous insights is that the shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of vitality. That energy you once used to suppress your frustration, it can fuel creative expression, clear decision-making, and unapologetic self-protection. The boundaries you were afraid to set, they become natural extensions of your respect for yourself. The voice you once silenced, it learns to speak truth with clarity instead of rage. But integration isn't automatic. It requires deliberate, ongoing work and the willingness to walk through discomfort. Jung warned that the unconscious resists change. It prefers familiar patterns, even painful ones, because they feel safe. So after snapping, the empath must resist the pull back into self-sacrifice. That means noticing the subtle ways you start to shrink again, agreeing to something you don't want, softening your words to avoid conflict, taking responsibility for emotions that aren't yours. This is why conscious practices are essential. Journaling your interactions, meditating on your boundaries, speaking with a therapist or mentor who understands depth psychology. Each step reinforces the new balance between care for others and care for self. And here's the unexpected truth. When you emerge from this process, your empathy doesn't weaken. It sharpens. It stops being an open floodgate and becomes a focused, intentional current. You no longer give indiscriminately, hoping to save everyone. You give where it matters, to people and causes aligned with your values. Your compassion becomes precise and far more powerful. This is what Jung might call the empowered empath. Not someone who has abandoned their gift, but someone who owns it without being owned by it. They've faced their shadow, learned from it, and allowed it to complete them. They can stand in the storm without being swept away. They can witness pain without absorbing it as their own. And perhaps most importantly, they can say no without guilt and yes without resentment. When you reach this stage, the snapping point that once felt like a breakdown becomes something else entirely, a moment of initiation. You have crossed a threshold into a new way of being, one that Jung believed was the very aim of human development. Individuation, the journey from a fragmented self to a unified one. But there's one more layer to this transformation, and it's not just personal. In Jung's view, the work of the individual ripples outward into the collective unconscious. When an empath integrates their shadow, they don't just heal themselves. They shift the archetype of the wounded healer in the larger human story. They show others that it's possible to care deeply without self-destruction. They become living proof that boundaries and compassion can coexist. And that might be the most important gift an empath can give. Not endless sacrifice, but an example of wholeness. In our final section, we'll explore how to carry this transformation into everyday life, how to live as an empowered empath in a world that still expects you to be endlessly available. Because this is where the real challenge begins. Holding your center, not just in moments of crisis, but in the quiet, relentless demands of ordinary days. The hardest part of transformation isn't the snapping point itself. It isn't even the messy work of integrating the shadow. The real challenge comes after the storm has passed, when you must live every single day as the person you've become. Carl Jung understood this intimately. In his view, individuation, becoming a whole, balanced self, is not a moment of arrival, but a lifelong practice. It's easy to hold your center when you're alone, reflecting on your journey. It's far harder when life's demands start knocking again, when old patterns come calling, and when the people around you expect you to return to who you were before. This is where many empaths falter. They do the inner work, they feel the shift, and then slowly, without even noticing, they slip back into overgiving. A friend calls with another crisis, and you drop everything to help. A coworker crosses your boundary, and you let it slide to avoid tension. One compromise leads to another, until you wake up realizing the new self you fought so hard to claim is slipping away. Jung would call this a failure to anchor the transformation. Without conscious reinforcement, the psyche will drift back to the familiar, even if that familiar is destructive. So how do you live as an empowered empath in the long term? It begins with ritualizing your boundaries. This isn't just about saying no in the moment. It's about creating a life structure that protects your emotional energy before it's drained. For some, that means scheduling regular solitude and treating it as non-negotiable. For others, it means keeping a daily practice of checking in with your body's signals, noticing tension, fatigue, or irritation as early warnings that your limits are being tested. The next piece is surrounding yourself with reciprocal relationships. An empowered empath doesn't need a large circle. They need a balanced one. People who give as much as they take. People who respect your no without punishment. People who celebrate your boundaries instead of seeing them as obstacles. Jung often emphasized that individuation cannot happen in isolation. We discover ourselves in relationship, but the right relationships. Ones that reflect your growth, not drag you back into old roles. The third piece is choosing where your empathy goes. Empathy is not infinite. It's a resource. And like any resource, it can be wasted or invested. The empowered empath learns to discern between those who genuinely want healing and those who simply want to feed on emotional energy. This is not cruelty, it's stewardship of your gift. The fourth piece is continuing shadow work. Just because you've integrated part of your shadow doesn't mean the work is done. The unconscious is vast, and more layers will surface over time. When you feel a surge of unexpected anger, envy, or fear, that's your next teacher. Meet it with curiosity, not judgment. Write about it. Explore it. Ask what it's showing you about the parts of yourself you still haven't claimed. And finally, the fifth piece is living your truth unapologetically. This may sound simple, but for empaths, it can be revolutionary. It means trusting your perceptions, even when others dismiss them. It means acting on your inner knowing without waiting for external validation. It means letting go of the need to be understood by everyone, and focusing instead on being understood by yourself. Jung believed that when a person reaches this place, when they live from their own center, fully aware of their light and their shadow, they become a force in the collective unconscious. They model a way of being that liberates others. For the empath, this is the ultimate transformation. No longer a silent sponge for the world's wounds, but a living example of what it means to care without collapsing. And here's the paradox. When you live like this, your empathy actually becomes more impactful. Because it's no longer tangled in self-sacrifice, it's free to be clear, direct, and strong. Your presence heals not because you absorb someone's pain, but because you stand as proof that it's possible to carry deep feeling and deep self-respect in the same heart. The day the empath snaps can feel like the worst day of your life. But in Jung's eyes, it can also be the most important. It's the moment the unconscious knocks at the door of your awareness, demanding to be let in. If you answer that call, if you face what you've hidden and learn to carry it with you, the snap becomes the start of a life where your gift is no longer a burden. It's a strength. So if you've reached that breaking point, remember, it's not the end of your empathy. It's the beginning of your wholeness.